things would you take with you if you were asked to evacuate in the next 5 minutes? I know it's kind of a scary thought, but it's something we all need to think about. What 3 things, just take a moment, would you take with you if you were asked to evacuate and have to leave your house in 5 minutes? Does everyone have something down? It takes a minute, doesn't it? So the point of me asking you to do this is because each of us has written something down that's completely different from the other person, right? And we all have different things. These are just ideas, of course. Obviously, we want family photos. And for these poor people up in Butte County, Southern California, last year, I had to evacuate my own mother last year in Sonoma. And it was hard. Like, she wants her computer. I couldn't take her computer and put it in the car. So you really have to give it a little thought. Be prepared. My biggest piece of advice, and I'm sure you've heard this 1,000 times, but be prepared. Make sure you have brush clearance away from your house, 50 to 100 feet, trees, brush, whatever. It can really make a difference. And also, have a disaster plan for your family. Just have some kind of an idea, like if you're in different places, who calls who, where do you meet, know what you're going to do. We don't want to face these things, but I think it's important to think about. And so I said, I asked you to write down 3 things. Mainly is because we want to make sure that your insurance policy, that's the one thing you can do to recover from a disaster. And it should help you through that process, not make it more difficult for you. So you want to make sure you know what you have, and you also want to make sure that it's tailored to you. So it's as individual as you are. It's not a one-size-fits-all, set it and forget it. And we were just talking about that before we got started with breakfast. And that a lot of people buy an insurance policy, set it, forget it, and I'll be fine. My personal property is covered under that. I have plenty, no worries. Actually, that couldn't be further from the truth. And the reason I also want you to think about your personal things is because your personal property is a section under your insurance policy. You have your dwelling, and I'm going to talk more about this, but your personal property is everything in your house. That's your world. That's the stuff you've collected. And if there's really valuable things like a piece of fine art or some jewelry, handmaids, lovely pearls that you've inherited, or something your husband bought you or your wife bought you, you might want to really think about putting that on a collections policy. You might want to really think about doing a blanket if you have a number of pieces of jewelry. Lori, I was noticing your gorgeous jewelry that you're wearing today. I'm sure that all has sentimental meaning to you. And so I would really recommend thinking about that. In the policies I work with my clients, there's no deductible, and there's no, you appraise your items or you list them out, and there's no deductible involved if they're lost or stolen or damaged. So it's just a little side note. Lost? Yeah. Mysterious disappearance. And then one thing this is from last year, and I'm sorry it's a harsh picture, but you can imagine this guy, like, what do I do now? And this happened just recently. We were all just talking about it. And one thing I'd really advise you do with your own things in your house, do an inventory. Now that seems like a lot of work, so if it is to you, just take your cell phone and go through each room and video what you have in that room. Maybe even the drawers, maybe your closet. To replace all your clothes and your shoes, that's a lot of money, especially for some of us ladies. Handbags, that's expensive. Shoes. Yeah, shoes. And so that's one thing. It would have been really great for him in making that insurance claim if he'd had everything documented. And then for the collections, of course, you can always get the full value of those items back too. So as we were saying, this was from last year, obviously. More people really didn't know that they were underinsured until the disaster happened. And that's the set it and forget it mentality. Talk to your agent. Make sure that you have a conversation with them and make sure your house is still insured to the value. And sadly, 99% of the times people don't know it until they do have a disaster. So the thing is, I wanted to really talk about how do you evaluate your insurance policy? What questions do you ask? So one thing is something called coverage A. It's what our insurance speak. It's also called your dwelling coverage. And that is what your house is, the structure of your house is insured for. Okay, so if you have And then you have an extended replacement cost. And that was mandated by the Department of Insurance back after the Oakland fires, remember those? So they required, because so many people lost their home and couldn't rebuild, they maybe put half a house together, but there wasn't enough money to the insurance limit. So they mandated an extended replacement cost. A lot of companies, a lot of policies I review, and I review a lot of them. I just looked at one yesterday, to be honest with you, a Palo Alto home, and it was insured for $600,000. Can you imagine? It's a 2,000 square foot house. That should be insured for $1.2 million. And he was just shocked when we had the conversation. He's going to buy a policy today. But you know, what he didn't have too is that they had extended replacement costs of 25%, which is pretty standard for most of the standard policies. And that doesn't give you very much if there's a disaster like we've seen last year and most recently, because what that means is if you have a $1 million extended, $1 million dwelling coverage, and you have extended replacement cost of 100%, that means you have $2 million to rebuild your house if there's a demand surge. Contractors are limited, materials are limited, wood is limited. So this is what's happening now. So we're seeing a big increase in building costs. Another reason to talk to your agent or your insurance broker. Personal property, we've talked about that. I do recommend a home inventory. Yes?
Just in addition to that, one of the things that changes frequently that we don't pay attention to are codes, building codes.
Oh, I was going to mention that. Thank you so much. No, I'm really glad you brought it up. And that is such a good point, because building codes are changing all the time. I mean, the city of Burlingame, I'm sure it's changed 1,000 times. And if your house was built in 1945, 1954, what have you, the building codes have changed dramatically since then. And most of the houses around here have been built in that period of time. So building codes, key point, and a lot of the policies I see are only 10% of the dwelling coverage. So if you have $1 million, imagine what that is. The policies I always make sure my clients have, always, is they have 100%. So it goes up to the limit of the policy, okay? But thank you for that, because I wanted to bring that up. And there's also something called a large loss deductible waiver. Policies I have for my clients means if you have a loss $50,000 or greater, no deductible, which is really important. Also, cash out option. If your house burns down, like this case in Butte County, like case in Southern California last year, your house is a total loss and you're terrorized. We were just talking about a woman who had to walk away from her car. You just don't want to rebuild. You just don't want someone to They just give you the money from your dwelling, from your personal property, and you can walk away and rebuild somewhere else.
What's that called?
Cash out option. So a lot of the standard policies don't have that, but the higher end policies do. And I always make sure my clients have that, if at all possible. And the replacement cost is aligned with supply and demand, and that's what I just mentioned there with the coverage A. The other question you want to ask yourself is like, what is my loss of use? It's called as an equivalent home to live in. That's something I also make sure my clients have, is an equivalent place to live. Same neighborhood, same type of house. If they want to stay in a hotel, they can. I had a client in Burlingame, actually lived across the street from me, and they had a terrible water loss. They happened to be in Hawaii with their grandson, and somehow the little hose that goes into the toilet sort of came loose, and water was, it was on the second floor, of course, water was flowing through their house. Fire department, Burlingame Fire Department was awesome. They came in. Unfortunately, there was even water going through the chandeliers in the dining room. It was just terrible. It took a year for them to get back in. They had the large loss deductible waiver. We just set them up with that. And so they didn't have any deductible. And they wanted to stay in the hotel, so that's what they did. But the company was willing to put them in an equivalent home. They just decided the hotel was easier. And then who do you call if you have a claim? Is it an 800 number? Do you have an agent you can call and then walk you through it? Do you have an advocate? People that we work with, we have an advocate in our office, and that's all she does is deal with claims. I can tell you right now, she's worth her weight in gold, because there's so many complicated things that come up with a claim, and the adjusters can be a little squirrely, so you really want to have someone on your side. So do ask that question, is there an advocate for you? And as a matter of fact, it was kind of cool, AIG, and I know they don't have the best reputation, but in Southern California, where most of the homes are insured, they actually waive the deductible for anyone who had fire loss from that big fire. They waive the deductible, which I thought was tremendous. So that's sometimes a little worth it to go with a higher end carrier. And so we also have to talk about umbrella exposures. Liability exposure. Unfortunately, it's a very litigious environment that we live in here. And You do need extra protection over your umbrella, over your home, over your auto. And I'm sure most of you are very familiar with the fact you have a liability limit on your umbrella policy, I keep saying it, on your auto and your home. Well, this is additional liability. How many of you have an umbrella policy? Awesome. Okay, excellent. Do you know if it covers your net worth?
Yes, mine does. Network.
So what I mean is the value of your home, the market value of your home, investable assets, really not your 401k, because that's not really, a litigator really can't grab onto that. But, so that's the key point. There's a lot of, this gentleman I was talking to yesterday with the house in Palo Alto, he did not have an umbrella policy. He owns a boat, he has 4 drivers in his house, those are the biggest exposures. So we talked about it, and we're looking at $5 million. Thank you. It's for him. But you can go on up to 10 million, 20 million on and on. So just so you know, and it's the least expensive part of your home insurance portfolio. Entertaining, I don't know if you knew this, but if you have someone who's had a couple drinks at your house from a party, good time to talk about this at Christmas time, holiday, they could drive off, get in an accident, and unfortunately, if it's a really tough litigator, they get in an accident, someone's really hurt, it can lead back to your home.
Yep. Yes.
Social media, we all know what that means. And personal injury, libel, or slander, that just happened to me. I went to high school in San Francisco, and my high school was a private high school. They actually posted things about the alum. They put my name, but it wasn't me. I was married to some guy named Mark Joseph. I had 2 sons, 27, 28. Like, that's not me. I had to call them and say, excuse me, that's the wrong person. Fortunately, it was one of my classmates. I knew it was. And then domestic staff. This is a huge one. If any of you employ someone in your home, that means they're an employee, and they can bring a lawsuit against their employer. Sexual discrimination, unfair labor practices, things like that. So you should have an endorsement on your umbrella policy. It's called an Employee Practices Liability, EPLI, if you employ someone in your home, part-time or full-time. And then sitting on a board. How many of you are on a nonprofit board? Okay, do you know what your nonprofit boards, do you know directors and officers coverage is?
Pardon?
Do you know what a directors and officers policy is? Do you know how much they have in a limit?
The one I have is $1 million.
Okay, that's typical of a nonprofit board. So be sure that if you have 10 board members, just know that your assets are at risk
Yeah.
if there is a lawsuit. Yes, Dave?
So if you hire people to clean your house and they bring their stuff in, do you need to insure against that risk?
It's really only for people who are employees of yours. Someone who's just coming in to clean your house every now and then, like less than 10, 20 hours a week, that's really not, you can worry about it, but it's very doubtful, and they're just coming in to clean.
Unless they
I mean,
get hurt.
people who are working for you, we have a contract with them.
However, if you have someone trimming a tree and he falls out,
Yeah.
you do have some
Yeah.
liability.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And make sure if someone's coming in to do work at your house, like, cutting trees or working on your roof, that they have a workers' comp policy.
I just wanted to mention about, you talked about the adjusters coming out to adjust your claim. And you had talked about a second floor flooding and so forth.
Yeah.
That happened to my partner, who was an immigrant, and one of the companies came out to talk to him and offered him, $300 over his deductible over this thing. And it was easily, and we're talking 20 years ago, it was easily $15,000, $20,000 worth of damage. And they wrote him a check right there for $800. And so I heard about it a couple days later. I called up the company and I said, this is not right. He says, well, he signed the thing, he knew what he was talking about. I said, no, come on. You guys took advantage of it. So I made them come back out. I wrote him a check for $19,000. And so he was very happy with his son.
I bet. I think the point's there. Fantastic.
Well, yeah.
So I'm running out of time, but I wanted to also mention another exposure of another reality, another new reality. It's not so new anymore, cyber risk. And actually, there's really never been insurance coverage for individuals for cyber coverage. It's always been for companies. Well, now there is. Last year, Pure Insurance and AIG came out with 2 programs. Pure's is the best one I've seen. So AIG's is okay, but it's extremely expensive. So, but it doesn't even do as much as Pure. Pure Insurance is a high-end insurance company like Chubb Insurance, if you're not familiar with them. As you can imagine, CEOs are very concerned about it, more than a hurricane, an earthquake. So these are some of the things that you need, that are concerns for everyone. And, phishing emails, when you get those emails, like they're pretending to be Apple or Wells Fargo or Bank of America. The really scary thing is the ransomware, where they actually get your data. Sometimes someone gets your data and then they try and get you to pay ransom to get your data back or to erase it. Forgery, alteration of checks. So you can probably read all this, and I'm happy to share these slides with you if you like. But this is what's scary. I know this is 2016, but imagine 15 million Americans lose their victims of identity theft. And you can put an identity theft endorsement on your homeowner policy, by the way. I think all the carriers offer them now. It's for it's the expenses to get your identity back, not for the actual money lost. Whereas what I'm talking about right now, this policy is for the money lost. You have to be a member of Pure in the sense that you have to have a homeowner policy with them to be able to add this endorsement for cyber coverage. But as you can probably read this yourself, this was a situation where a person had discovered $240,000 had been wired from his bank account, and the bank received an email purporting to be from the member, and called the member's cell. It was confirmed, but the cyber criminal had gotten hold of the phone. So, imagine, that would just be awful. And that's $240,000 gone. This is what I was talking about, cyber extortion. And the one thing that Pure does is that they have coverage for the money lost, but they also have, and you can always find a good IT cyber monitoring service too, to monitor all your devices to see if there's anybody trying to creep in there. And these are some of the pricing, just to give you an idea. And again, it's an endorsement on a homeowner policy. But for $250 to have $100,000 of coverage, that would be great. And then $1 million, they require you to have a Rubrica or a monitoring company help you out and monitor your devices. So essentially, I'm here to help my clients in the risk management. I'm looking at everything. The cyber exposure, they have young kids, I'm on computers quite a bit. I'm looking at annual reviews. Let's say a teenage driver, I felt that way a few years ago. Teenage drivers, in the household, you really need to look and make sure the umbrella is proper. And I'm a claims advocates for our clients, so that's something I really take very seriously. We had a client who had an amazing art collection up in Napa, and they their house was really under siege with the fire coming in. And so one of our client managers got a great organization called Call Mall, and they came up and they removed all the art. Fortunately, the fire came real close to the house, but it didn't burn it down. But smoke damage could have really caused damage with the art. So, that's the kind of thing we do for our clients. We really look out for them. And that's what you want your agent to do for you, be your advocate. If you were planning a remodel or planning on building a home, that changes your insurance policy dramatically. It could even be invalid or not even effective unless you let your agent know. And if you do let your agent know, let them know the scope of this construction project. And that is really all I have for you.
What about animals? You haven't covered that. I know California and some insurance companies, they have certain animals are prohibited.
Yeah, their dogs are a huge liability.
Yeah.
And that is because there's been so many dog bites. It's the biggest liability claim that we see.
Right. Is there an increase, I know, like pit bulls and stuff like that?
Yes, German shepherds, exactly.
Does that increase or does that prohibit homeowners insurance or what?
You could have a dog exclusion on your policy.
Wow.
Yeah, so a lot of times I'll work with the underwriter on that. I've had people who have pit bulls, and they can be darling dogs. I'm a dog lover myself, but some of them are just bred incorrectly.
Right, no, yeah.
So,
but you mean that could be an exclusion on your homeowner's policy? Wow.
I know. Wow. So, yes.
I'm in the construction field, and just an update. The construction costs are skyrocketing. What used to be reasonable now, the latest thing, my friend's building in Athens at $650 a square foot.
Oh, yeah.
And it all depends on the community and all kinds of things, but that's not the land, that's the construction cost. Plus the permit will run you over $100,000, and you're not covered for the permit, and you have to update to all the modern codes. And they're constantly changing the codes, And so you get in and you can't remodel because you have to update all the codes for your house at that time, and that can cost you another $100,000.
So
I'm
what's
so
your
glad.
question?
Oh, sorry.
It was a comment.
Oh,
A comment.
I'm sorry.
And I just wanted to share a comment. It's a comment. My coworker and her husband, she's retiring from our office December 11th. They were renting in Campbell and they bought a house in Paradise this year. And she was in the office on that Thursday when the fire started, and it took them about 5 days before they found out, because they couldn't go up there. Yes, their house completely burned down, and they had for months been bringing everything up there. But what happened was they had it listed as their secondary resident until December 1st, not their primary. So that totally, that's a lesson. I mean, they didn't know, so they didn't get
Full coverage?
yes, because it wasn't listed as their primary.
Well, they should have had it, if it was done correctly, they should have had full coverage. It doesn't sound like it's structured quite right.
No,
That's it, tricky. Insurance is so tricky.
I'm sorry?
Arguing.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, so she went up there, they just got to go up there last week, and they met with FEMA, and they've signed up for all this stuff, but she said it's just, it's just a disaster.
You're going to see increases in insurance, I hate to tell you, because of the fact what you just mentioned in terms of the building costs. And AIG has actually realized this, and they used to get a 2 to 5% increase, inflation increase year over year. Now it's going to be more like 10%, because even though they inspected the home and they verified how much it would cost to build, they've changed dramatically to your point, and now they have to increase that.
One other question. Insurance companies, I guess you've dealt with a lot of them. I know when my house burned, before the fire department left, my insurance company had a rep out on scene. You know, it wasn't a big fire like this, was an individual home, right? So when I called them, they had somebody out there. They arranged for, us a place to live and all this other stuff, but they were there, starting the process immediately.
Yeah, that's what you want.
I thought that was fantastic. Rather than, waiting days and this type of thing, but I mean, and that was just, unbelievable that they had somebody there.
And that's a good point, because the higher-end insurance companies will have a wildfire mitigation. They'll come in with their fire crew, their own private fire crew, and try and protect your house with the foam. Some of these fires have moved too fast, like the ones up in Napa, North Bay, they just moved too fast. The fire crews, the local fire crews, they were worried about the safety of people's lives, so they couldn't really bring them in.
Just a comment, a friend of mine's son is a fireman in San Jose. He was deployed to Butte County, and their specialty was protecting the homes in the area. If the home did not have a defensible space around it, they were told to go to the next house.
Oh, wow.
So for anybody
Great point.
living in those areas, that defensible space is extremely important.
That's why I brought that up, 50 to 100 feet.
Yeah.
Can you hang around afterwards? Because we think Sylvia's going to wrap this up.
Yeah, I know. Sorry.
I got a question I want to ask
Thank you
you.
very much.
Thank you.